My mom was sobbing, my brother was pretending to be concerned, and my aunt had wellness brochures like she was pitching a spa weekend. They said they were worried about me, my mental health, my isolation. But the truth? They weren't trying to save me. They were trying to distract me. Because while I was supposedly spiraling, my brother was busy stealing from me. $18,000 to be exact. If you've ever had people question your sanity just to cover their own mess, you're not alone. Hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for a story where the intervention turns into a full-blown courtroom drama. Justice wasn't just served, it was ice cold.
My name is Lena Whitaker. I'm 30 years old, licensed as a crisis counselor, and for the past decade, I've made a career out of talking people down from emotional cliffs, sometimes literally. I've sat with teenagers as they admitted things they'd never said out loud, helped parents reconnect with kids they thought they'd lost, and walked people through the kind of nights that chew you up and spit you out. I know what real crisis looks like. What I didn't know, at least not yet, was how to recognize it in myself. See, when you're the one people lean on, there's this silent rule. You don't fall apart, ever. You cope, you compartmentalize, you schedule your grief between Zoom calls and talk yourself through panic attacks while folding laundry. And for years, I did exactly that. Right up until the day my fiancé sat me down, looked me dead in the eyes, and told me he was in love with someone else, someone from work, someone who wasn't me. That was the unraveling thread. I didn't scream or throw things, I just left. Packed a duffel bag, drove 8 hours without a plan, and crashed at a cheap motel near my hometown, where I hadn't lived since high school. I didn't even tell anyone I was coming back. I just showed up, raw and emptied out. The only thing I did plan was this cabin. It came up at a county auction, a half-rotted lakeside fixer-upper nestled between towering pines and long-forgotten fishing docks. I won it with a bid that barely scraped past $40K. No inspection, no guarantees, just a moldy roof and potential. It was everything I needed. Sure, the place had raccoons in the attic and plumbing that groaned like it had regrets, but it was mine. I threw myself into the work, tore out drywall, learned how to solder copper pipe from YouTube. I hammered my heartbreak into floorboards and painted over old pain with fresh coats of defiance. I didn't need noise. I needed silence, loud enough to hear myself again. I wasn't spiraling. I was healing. But apparently, to my family, who hadn't seen me much since I stopped replying to their just checking in group texts, this looked like isolation, like depression, like something to be fixed. And they were about to try. I grew up in a family where roles weren't earned. They were handed out like party favors. And once you got yours, good luck ever switching it. Mine? The golden girl, the good daughter. The one who knew better, did better, and most importantly, kept her emotions zipped up and tucked away behind a polite smile. From the outside, that probably looked like pride, like I enjoyed being the dependable one. And maybe I did, for a while. I liked the praise, the approval, the way my mom bragged about me to the church ladies like I was some kind of prize pumpkin. Lena just got accepted early to state, she'd say, eyes lit up. Full ride, of course. But what no one noticed was that I was also the cleanup crew. Every Thanksgiving ruined by Jake's latest incident, I'd smooth it over. Every slammed door, every tearful voicemail from mom, every "don't tell your father" whispered in the hallway, I absorbed it, quietly, without complaint. That was the job. Jake, on the other hand, was the family's favorite disaster. My older brother, all charm and chaos. The kind of guy who could crash your car, forget your birthday, and still make you laugh until you forgave him. He had this natural ability to wriggle out of consequences like they didn't apply to him. He got arrested for stealing liquor when he was 17. Mom cried, Dad bailed him out. Jake said, it was a stupid dare, and everyone moved on. He dropped out of college 3 times, switched jobs like socks, dated girls who needed just as much fixing as he did, then left them when they clung too hard. But every time, the narrative stayed the same. He's just struggling. He'll get there. Meanwhile, I was expected to already be there. I never got to struggle. Struggling meant weakness. It meant disappointing people. I could be exhausted, falling apart inside, screaming into a pillow at 2 a.m., and as long as I smiled the next morning and made my deadlines, no one questioned it. In fact, they praised it. "You're so strong, Lena." That phrase became a collar. The first time I told my mom I needed space, after the breakup, after the move, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Honey, are you okay? You sound off." I told her I was just tired, that I needed time, that I was rebuilding, literally and emotionally. She didn't hear me, not really. And the silence that followed? Deafening. They didn't visit, they didn't call, not often. They just let me disappear into this new chapter, and I was fine with that. Until I wasn't. Because even in isolation, I still felt the weight of their expectations pressing in like fog. The guilt, the subtle messages, the unspoken disappointment that I wasn't showing up, wasn't performing. Worse, Jake started texting again. Random things, old jokes. "Remember when we tried to build a treehouse and fell through the garage roof?" he'd write. Or, "Heard you went all cabin in the woods. You gonna start baking sourdough next?" At first, I ignored them, but there was something off in his tone. Too friendly, too warm. Like he was trying to rewrite history, as if we were close. We weren't, not really. Not since I stopped playing his therapist when we were kids. Still, I told myself, maybe it was growth. Maybe he was changing. Spoiler, he wasn't. The real twist was how quickly the narrative turned when I stopped being useful. When I finally needed them to understand me, the Golden Girl label cracked, and what poured out was suspicion, concern, judgment. Suddenly, I was not myself. Suddenly, I was the one making people worry. The irony? It took me 30 years to choose myself, and the minute I did, I became the problem. That's the thing about families like mine. They'll praise your independence until it stops serving them. And I was about to find out just how far they'd go to pull me back into the role they'd written for me, whether I wanted it or not. I don't throw parties. I've never been that person. But something about finishing the back deck, after months of splinters, rain delays, and budget nightmares, made me feel like I could finally exhale. Like maybe I'd earned a moment of peace. And maybe, just maybe, a sliver of reconnection with the people who still called me family. So I invited them. A casual Saturday barbecue. I prepped ribs the night before, made my grandma's coleslaw recipe, even chilled a 6-pack of the cheap beer my dad used to love. I set out citronella candles and dragged out my old Bluetooth speaker. The cabin finally looked like a place people lived in, not just hid inside of. It felt like progress. They arrived in staggered clumps, like they'd carpooled but didn't want me to know. Smiles, hugs. My mom's eyes scanned the perimeter like she was casing the place. Jake cracked jokes about how rustic everything looked. Aunt Lillian brought potato salad and that passive-aggressive energy that always showed up first to every event. And for about 20 minutes, it worked. Music played, the grill hissed, people laughed. Then my mom stood up. She placed her paper plate down with military precision and reached into her oversized purse. I thought maybe she was getting tissues or bug spray. Nope. She unfolded a piece of paper, creased neatly into quarters, and cleared her throat like she was addressing Congress. What followed was a speech that used the word concern 5 times in the first paragraph. I counted. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder like he was the grief-stricken son of a mother barely holding it together. Aunt Lillian nodded in grim rhythm, like a backup singer in a tragedy. They had rehearsed this. The statement went on about my withdrawal from social support, attachment to routine, and avoidance of meaningful interpersonal connections. Big words, clinical ones, words I'd written myself in patient notes. It was like hearing my own vocabulary weaponized against me. Then came the offer, a 30-day wellness retreat in Arizona. Yoga, group therapy, digital detox, all expenses paid, if I agreed right then. Jake chimed in like he was offering a lifeline, his voice syrupy with faux empathy. "You just don't seem like you anymore, Lena. You're emotionally flat, like the spark's gone." That's when I knew. This wasn't love. This was a setup. I scanned the scene, Mom clutching her statement, Jake's too casual stance, Lillian's pamphlets already fanned out on the table like a sales pitch. I froze, but not because they'd gotten to me. I froze because I felt it in my gut. This was a distraction, a misdirection. Jake's foot tapped, not nervously, but eagerly. He was amped, buzzing, like he had skin in the game and couldn't wait for me to sign the dotted line. So I nodded. "I'll think about it," I said, matching their concern with my own polished neutrality. Then I smiled and served dessert, strawberry shortcake, homemade. After they left, I sat alone on that new back deck and replayed every moment. The way Jake never asked to see the cabin but commented on the square footage. The fact that Mom kept glancing at her phone like she was on a countdown. The way Lillian, who once told me therapy was a scam, now suddenly believed in holistic healing. Something was off. And when things don't make sense on the surface, I dig. It's what I do. I spent years counseling people through deception, grief, relapse, denial. Patterns don't lie. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down everything. Every phrase, every glance, every strange silence over the last few months. The Christmas card that never came. The random check-in texts from Jake. The property assessor I caught snooping around the cabin 2 weeks earlier. It was all starting to link. And beneath the concern, beneath the carefully rehearsed speech, I saw it clearly. This wasn't about me being emotionally vacant. This was about me being in the way. In the way of something Jake wanted. I didn't know what yet, but I would. Because now, I wasn't the golden girl, or the fixer, or the emotional sponge. Now, I was the observer, and they just handed me a map to their real intentions, written in guilt, sealed with manipulation. They thought I'd disappear quietly. They were wrong. I've always told clients that clarity comes when we stop chasing the wrong explanations and start asking better questions. So that's what I did. The morning after the intervention, I sat at my kitchen table, same spot I journaled teenage heartbreaks and breakup letters I never sent, and pulled up my credit report. It was a gut instinct, the kind you don't question. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just a sense check. That's when I saw it. A new credit card account opened 6 weeks earlier. Balance over $18,000. Flights, electronics, hotel rooms, tech gear I wouldn't even know how to set up. My name was on it, but not my life. Then the charge that made my stomach drop, a featured listing fee for a real estate platform, the kind people use to sell second homes or remote cabins they think no one will miss. It all clicked. Jake. I could practically hear his voice in my head. "I lost my wallet, Lena. Can I just borrow your ID to check into the hotel? I swear I'll give it right back." And I had, because back then, I still believed blood made people trustworthy. I didn't scream, I didn't slam drawers or throw my phone. I went silent, dead calm. Because when I'm quiet, that's when I'm planning. Step 1, shut it all down. I froze the card, locked my credit, and flagged my identity with the major bureaus. Then I called Carla. Carla is an attorney I met during a mandatory continuing ed class on trauma-informed care. We bonded over courtroom coffee and the fact that both our exes borrowed money and never returned it. She's the kind of person who never blinks during a negotiation and sends Christmas cards with just her initials. If there was anyone who could unravel this mess without flinching, it was her. She didn't even hesitate. "Give me the logins and a strong cup of coffee. I'll have him nailed in 2 days." She wasn't wrong. 48 hours later, I had a digital folder on my desktop labeled Jake the Thief. Inside, timestamps, purchase history, IP address trails, email confirmations. He hadn't even tried to use a VPN. Rookie. He'd listed the cabin for sale under a shell company tied to a burner email, but the domain had been purchased from a traceable account. There were messages with potential buyers, pictures from inside the cabin, my pictures, my belongings. It wasn't just fraud. It was a home invasion, digitally orchestrated and greed-fueled. And while Carla handled the legal hammer, I started doing something else, collecting stories. Every text from my mom that sounded just a little too scripted. Every voicemail from Aunt Lillian telling me she missed my light. I started transcribing them, saving them, not just for evidence, but for understanding, for the emotional ledger I'd always kept in the background. Because it wasn't just Jake. It never had been. Jake might have signed the paperwork, but they all held the pen. My mom co-signed one of the applications, claimed she thought it was helping me build credit. Aunt Lillian sent my birthday to Jake, just in case the form needed it. Their fingerprints were all over it. And when I connected the dots, it became clear. They hadn't been worried about my isolation. They were trying to isolate me. I was an obstacle, a stubborn barnacle clinging to something they wanted to gut and resell. The cabin. It had belonged to my father's side. It wasn't much, but it sat on a plot of land zoned for short-term rentals. Jake had pitched an idea to some investor friend about transforming trauma retreats into luxury eco-getaways. I found the deck, the business plan, the fake testimonials. He was using my degrees, my story, my grief to sell his startup fantasy. And he needed me gone to make it work. Here's where the story pivots. I didn't confront him right away. I didn't send a furious group text or blow up at my mom. I didn't even change the locks. Instead, I bought time. I started showing up at their events again, casual, present. I let them believe I was coming around. Jake texted me more than usual. Aunt Lillian invited me to a candle-making class. My mom sent a recipe for gluten-free banana bread. They were testing the waters, seeing if the spell had worked. And I let them. Because there's a strange power in pretending to play along when you're already holding the ending in your hands. Carla filed the case under federal identity theft. Because of the dollar amount and the interstate charges, we had leverage, real leverage. And Jake, he wasn't just facing a slap on the wrist. But it wasn't enough for me to win in court. I wanted them to know I'd seen them. All of them. So I crafted my own little performance, a moment I'll tell my future self about every time I doubt my strength. It started with a text to the group. Hey, I've been thinking, maybe we should do a family dinner again, on me. Just want to say thank you for caring enough to intervene. They responded with enthusiasm only guilty people can manufacture. I made the reservation. Private room, white tablecloth, set for 7. Carla helped me with the next part. And while the law did its thing in the background, summons issued, documents prepared, timelines reviewed, I built the emotional stage. Because revenge isn't just about justice. It's about clarity. It's about saying, I saw what you did, and I'm still standing. What they didn't know as they polished their shoes and rehearsed their concerned smiles for our dinner reunion was that the next course wasn't forgiveness. It was reckoning. And I had prepared every dish myself. I waited. Not because I wasn't ready, but because I wanted them to think I was. The dinner was set for a Thursday. I picked a restaurant with heavy chairs, soft lighting, and white tablecloths stiff enough to hold a grudge. The kind of place you go to negotiate alimony or break a trust fund deal. I wore my version of armor, black blazer, no makeup, hair pulled back like a nonsense school principal who'd stopped giving extensions. They all showed up smiling. Jake went for the double hug and side cheek pat. My mother handed me a bottle of wine for the cabin. Aunt Lillian wore a brooch shaped like a dove, as if the symbolism would patch what she helped fracture. We ordered, we small-talked. They leaned in when I mentioned I'd been doing some thinking. They toasted to new beginnings, glasses clinking over lies. I let them sip. Midway through the entrees, I reached into my bag and pulled out the stack of envelopes, cream-colored, heavyweight, personalized. I placed each one in front of them like a game show host handing out consolation prizes. Jake opened his first. His jaw clenched so tight I thought he'd shatter a molar. His summons was thick. Fraud, identity theft, unauthorized use of a financial instrument, and a restraining order pending review. Aunt Lillian blinked rapidly at her witness subpoena. She mouthed something I didn't care to read. My mother's was thinner, but colder. A formal notice of investigation tied to her co-signed application. She'd later tell people she didn't read the fine print, that she just wanted to help. But there's no clause for enabling criminal fraud, just as there's no redemption arc for silence when it mattered. Jake tried to laugh. "This is a mistake," he said, eyes darting between us. "I thought she said I could use her name." I said nothing. Silence does what yelling never could. It lingers. It fills every corner with judgment. It lets people hear their own excuses echo back at them. That night, I didn't stay for dessert. In the months that followed, the legal machine did its slow, grinding work. Carla handled it like a surgeon, precise, clinical, unbothered. Jake eventually folded under pressure and took a plea deal. He avoided jail, but not the consequences. Community service, restitution, and a permanent black mark that follows him like a shadow in every job interview he'll ever take. The cabin never went on market again. I kept it for a while, cleaned out the fake plans Jake had stuffed in the closet, saged the space for good measure. Then, in a twist worthy of poetic closure, I sold it. Triple the value. But I didn't use the money for revenge. I used it for healing. With that windfall, I launched my own retreat series. Not the polished, performative kind Jake dreamed of. Mine were quiet, intentional, raw. I called them the Reclaim Rooms, a space for women who had been gaslit by the people who claimed to love them most, the ones who were told you're overreacting when they were actually waking up. We cried together, we hiked, we journaled, we burned letters never sent. We made peace, but never again at the cost of our boundaries. As for me, I left the state, packed what I needed into a used Subaru and pointed west. Colorado felt like an exhale I hadn't had in years. Fewer phone calls, more silence that didn't sting. I found a coffee shop that remembered my order, a bookstore where no one asked about my family, and a trail that curved behind my new rental where I could walk for hours without seeing a soul. No more interventions. No more explaining why "she's just worried about you" doesn't excuse manipulation. I didn't just win. I walked away with myself intact. And this time, that was more than enough. They tried to convince me I needed saving, when really they just needed me out of the way. But the thing about being underestimated, it makes the victory that much sweeter. I wasn't the one drowning. I was the lifeguard they tried to push under. It's funny the way people rewrite your story when you stop letting them hold the pen. Suddenly you're cold, distant, hard to reach. But really, you're just done bleeding for people who bring knives to every relationship. Healing doesn't always look like yoga and smoothies. Sometimes it's paperwork, courtrooms, saying no and not explaining why. It's choosing peace over contact. It's watching the phone ring and not picking up, because this time you know exactly what's on the other end. I used to think forgiveness meant letting them back in. Now I know it means walking away without bitterness, just clarity. I built a life from the ruins they tried to steal, and it turns out I like the view better from here. It's quiet, it's mine, and most importantly, it's far beyond their reach.
If you've ever been gaslit, guilt-tripped, or ghosted by people who were supposed to love you, drop a comment. What's the most satisfying revenge you've witnessed? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a little justice in their feed. Stay sharp, stay kind, and never let anyone flip your cabin behind your back.